Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Ken Lowry here, and he is a philosopher who is engaged with living out of the journey towards wisdom, works in medicine. He has two young children and a wonderful wife, and is wrestling a lot with Christianity, which also I am doing at the moment as well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, man, Christianity is such a big topic. And I've been doing a lot of research into the Protestant Revolution. I just read a great book by The World Lit by Fire.
Mm,
Highly recommend it. I think he was a humanist, so like one of the secular humanists. I didn't actually research him
okay.
that much, but I think he was a secular humanist because he was very much like sort of aggressive towards both what was going on with the Catholics, and then he was like, "Okay, the Protestants are going to come and save us," and then he goes like, "Oh wait, no, the Protestants were also kind of nuts," and because like during that time, Borgia was having orgies, and the Pope was having orgies, and everything like that, and then he's like. The craziest thing he said about Martin Luther. It's going to get a little graphic, but so Martin Luther was a monk, and he was didn't try to set off a revolution. He was a devout monk who just had happened to post some skepticism around the what do they call them, the indulgences, and then he was the first viral content creator, and so went viral. But apparently, he had not just sort of auditory hallucinations about the devil and all the things. He had full on, like the devil was in the room with him, and he would like his main battles with the devil would involve a lot of fecal matter and like farting and other things, and like, and it was so just totally crazy stuff. Hopefully we didn't start that off on the wrong foot, but like what it's so Christianity is this giant topic with so many things, and recently I've been feeling that the Protestant Revolution is they've protested now, right? There has been a protest, and those things have been like the Catholic Church isn't the same church, right?
Mm,
What's going on in your world regarding all these topics?
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm no expert on any of these figures, but from what I know, and I've done a reasonable amount of reading and things around all this, so from what I know, that's pretty reasonable as in terms of a characterization of Luther. I mean, he always strikes me as a guy who's very, very sincere, and
Yep.
very um, like genuinely engaged in trying to clear out gunk from the pathways to get somebody connected to God,
Mm.
um, and Christ, but also like he's caught up in a lot of things that he doesn't understand, as we all always are, right? Like he's I think the viral content creator is a really good way, I think, of pointing to it, because if you don't have the printing press, the the Protestant Reformation doesn't happen, I don't think. And
Mm.
in some sense, the Reformation, in my view, is inextricably connected with the printing press and the change in information dissemination that entails, because a lot of what the church was at that point and is not anymore, I think, was sort of this institution that was the authority of what's true,
Yep. Yep.
which had to do with information being so scarce. And so the shift to, and you can understand, like one of the ways I think of the distinction between Protestant and Catholic, especially around the time of the Protestant Reformation, is largely around the idea of mediation,
Mm.
right? Is Can one on one's own come into deep contact with Christ and God, or is mediation
Yeah.
essential
Interesting.
for that? And so when you have a shift in ideas becoming available to everyone,
Yeah.
the
Interesting.
mediation changes too, right? Because if there's only one book of Aristotle's Ethics in the surrounding 500 miles, like, and I can't read, somebody has to tell me what it says. But if I can suddenly read it, and and Plato and Plotinus, and like, if I can read all these things, I am suddenly the place where the
Yeah. Interesting.
interface
Yeah.
happens.
Interesting.
And so, as much as, well, so this gets very quickly into questions about um, God and Christ in relation to information interfacing, um, which is maybe more of like a technical way to go about it. But
Mm.
I think, I don't know, that was like the thing that really stuck out to me in what you shared there. And also, you talked about sort of Luther's encounters with the devil and fecal matter specifically, which is sort of hilarious when you read some of his writings. Um,
So that's true. So that was not just an attack from this. You've seen other examples of that. Yeah,
yeah, as far as I
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's like he writes about it.
yeah,
Um, I am always quite hesitant with the word hallucinations.
yeah. Interesting.
Um, in and that comes from somebody who does medicine and sees people in in wild mental states all the time. But I think that we don't understand how perception works, and so hallucination. I'm not sure at all. Given who Martin Luther, like the impact that he ended up having in the world, I think the probability that he actually had interaction with the devil was probably like pretty high.
Mm.
I'm not saying that. I'm not
Oh,
saying that he
interesting.
was. I'm not saying that he was, you know, on board with what the devil, with the devil's program. But
Yeah.
he's certainly like one of your most influential figures in all of history.
Yeah, interesting. So it's like a sort of main character event type of thing where he was a main character, and that's who the devil sort of attracts, or not only attracts, but sort of goes after. Like, because if a main character is actually playing at the level of making history, which Martin Luther definitely was doing, then there's no question there's a target there. Yep.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Let's go on to the information processing, because now it's like in overdrive, and a lot of
Right.
people are coming back to Christ, particularly in the West.
Yeah.
But do you think they're coming back to the Protestant? Does the Protestant offer something? It feels like more people are being drawn back into Catholicism and into Orthodox as a sort of older, as that apostolic succession type of thing where there's a longer tradition. What do you think? Does Protestantism still hold something of value? And I don't want to mean to make this sound like there's a lot of value in all of the different religious traditions. But it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I think I understand the question. I mean, this is a so yeah. I mean, this question has so much to it, and I spend a lot of my time in this question because I mean, I'm living this question at the moment, right? I'm genuinely between the Catholic, the Protestant, and the Orthodox. There's a Protestant
Mm.
church up the road that my wife has some friends at that we may go to. There's an Orthodox church we visited several times. There's a Catholic church we visited several times. My wife jokes that sometimes hourly I switch between which one I
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to
yeah. I'm in the same
act
boat. Yeah.
because I mean I'm not interested in sort of just shop. Part of it is like I
Yeah.
hate the
Yeah.
fact that I have the choice, right?
Yeah.
I think the fact that I have a choice is sort of bizarre anyway. But to leave that aside, I think if I understood your question, it was something like, do you think that the Protestant church holds what people are looking for versus the more traditional churches,
Well, but
or how relevant?
you just gave me a new insight into that question, which is essentially like there are choices, whereas before there were no choices. That if you were in 900s, and I'm actually reading another book now because of The World Lit by Fire, where it talks about how Ireland was the one place where Christianity was saved, and while the pagans invaded from the Vikings invaded, they removed Christianity from the England, but it was already saved, and then it brought back from there. So at that time, in that period, if you were in Ireland in the 900s, you were Catholic. There was no, I mean, I guess you could go back to paganism, but you're just like in this small little village, and it's like, as you said, there's no books about Aristotle, and the only ones who can read them are the monks who are like transcribing it. And so like there was no option; it was just the truth.
Right, right,
And that's not just in the West either. There's also Buddhism. It's like if you were in
right, right.
in Southeast Asia and Thailand, it's like there's the Islam invaded later, so there were options, but usually it's not like people converted in a way that we can convert, which is like, oh, that's really interesting. I like that idea. It was like, no, you're the king just converted, so you're now this, so there's like the information processing. There's so many options, but in many ways, I think that's leading us back to that to not necessarily religion, but to uh, truth. Yeah, I don't know where the words aren't great here. So, but what do you think about that?
Well, I feel like to go back to sort of the original question, there's something about the way that what the focus is, sort of like
Mm.
what's the telos of the
Mm.
of me as a particular individual participating in the space. So in a Protestant church, what do you get? You go and it's all very information forward.
Mm.
There's an experiential element in the worship services generally, where you're singing songs and
Interesting.
depending on which flavor, people are going to be raising their hands and maybe even jumping around. Sometimes they're a lot more
Interesting.
stoic about it. But then like the main focus, where everything like the culmination of the
Yep.
experience of being in the church is about a teaching. It's about here's information. I'm going to basically give you a lecture, and it's even sort of set up in that manner. Whereas Catholic and then Orthodox, maybe even more so, the focus is like the culmination, the pinnacle, the telos of the service is the Eucharist,
Hmm.
and the rhythm of the service is liturgy, and it's very much about
Hmm.
being embodied. It's about changing your body position. It's
Mm.
about participating with these movements and music that is much more akin to something like a um, uh, meditation ritual. I think if you do it properly, it's more of a prayer and meditation ritual that sort of binds you in with the group of people that you're with to
Hmm.
sort of come into a proper orientation that includes all the, or at least as many layers of your being as you can, to then actually engage in this moment of eating God.
Hmm.
and and
Interesting.
and so there's a distinct difference. Now again, to go back to that difference of the mediation question, I think the thing that you know I live in this question, like I said, and I think about it a lot, and I talk a lot about it with some good friends. And one of the things I feel is that we obviously we're at this hinge point in history,
Yeah.
and you have on one hand the sort of the Orthodox and Catholic Church are these behemoths, right? They've been here for a long time. They're old, they're steady, they're very stalwart, right? And they also tend to move slowly, right? And the Protestant is just, it moves fast, and there's people going this way and that way, and there's all this
Interesting.
movement happening, right? And I think whatever the church is, it's something more mysterious than an institution. I'm convinced of that.
Interesting. Wait, can you go more into that? What do you mean by that?
Well, so Aaron would have a lot to say about this part at this point. So he's like jumping in on this side. I mean, are you familiar with Michael Levin and some of his stuff?
Yes. Yeah. 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 And Aaron showed me that, and now I've gone down the
The
rabbit
rabbit hole.
hole of that, which is totally mind blowing.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like noticing that you're not the top of the stack, right? You're not
Wait.
the top of the stack of spiritual. If you understand a spirit as a purpose, right, a goal that is not sort of just a goal that one below creates or has, but it's actually a goal, an intelligence towards a particular goal that has a what is it? It's like a drawing force to it, right? It can
Hmm.
seduce people towards it. And so if you just sort of understand generally that people can get caught up in a spirit, and then they form the body of that spirit, right? So a
Hmm.
sports team is your easiest example, right? The well, let's say the Los Angeles Dodgers, right? Because they're in the World Series right now. It's like, well, is the Dodgers a real thing? Yeah. Well, where is it? Point to it, right? Is it the stadium? Is it the manager? Is it Shohei Ohtani? Is it Mookie Betts? No, they're all participating in it. And as a matter of fact, every person who is a fan of the team is also participating in it, right? The fans who come and pay their money are participating in the body of the spirit of the Los Angeles Dodgers that allows them to pay Mookie Betts to play shortstop. And and all of that constellates ultimately towards the final goal, which is winning the World Series, right? The spirit of the Los Angeles Dodgers is towards winning the World Series. And every person who's participating in that spirit is aimed towards that goal. They're willing it to happen, right? So I think that spirits are real, first of all, and that spirits operate in hierarchies, right? Like even within that example, you have the spirit of Major League Baseball, which is above the Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Los Angeles Dodgers exist within that spirit, right? So there's a hierarchy of spirits.
So how do you connect that with Michael Levin's work? And for our listeners, Michael Levin basically went and he is in the lab and he's creating these new life forms based on not genetic engineering, but he's going and messing with the physiological state space, the transcriptional state space, the metabolic state space. So basically making changes to the environment and then having these sort of life forms pop up that have a new morphology is what they're calling it. So it's like a new body. How do you connect that with the vertical spirit thing? What is the...
Yeah. So the main thing, the main thing in at least as far as I understand, Michael, which is, I'm sure he had, like, I would love to talk to him about.
I would love to talk to him as well. Yeah.
Because the main thing that he's doing is changing electrochemical patterns.
Whoa.
Right. So he's looking at bioelectricity, and you can see the pattern of an organism, and you can change that pattern, and without changing any of the physical parts of the information, i.e. the hardware, you're basically changing the software, which is, I think, something like a spirit that then changes the body, right? So you have a one-headed planaria. You change the bioelectric pattern, and it now grows two heads, right? So what you've done is change the spirit, you've changed the goal, and the body follows, right? And this happens across scale, right? So you notice that you have liver cells, you have nerve cells, etc. They all participate in the higher order entity that is you, but it's in and through their proper participation with their own goals, right? So they have their own goals, and then they network with other things that have the same goal, and then ultimately it scales upward. And so I think that I think Jesus is the highest spirit. Christ is the highest spirit. And he's the only spirit that if you aim fully towards him, then you actually get a capacity for all the lower order spirits to properly organize themselves. Right? So
wow.
There's this idea, it's in a lot of places, but it's best articulated, I think, in C.S. Lewis, where he says something like, in Screwtape Letters, he says it as, God will take everything from you, and then with the other hand, he'll give it right back, and you'll be like the way you are most fully your particular idiosyncratic self is actually when you are entirely given over to Christ, because that's actually the place that your peculiar particularities are most emphasized. So I think the church is basically the all the people who are fully and genuinely, well, maybe not fully because then you're a saint, but at least
interesting,
as much as they can be aimed towards participation with Jesus and the Spirit of Christ, and that actually, like, on a much deeper level than sort of structured information or institutions, it actually orients you towards it orients you.
It's like a compass.
Yeah, exactly. And then but then, like, that doesn't do away with the institution or the church. It's sort of like, well, if you can, it just augments. It's like, well, how can you get better at aiming? That's always the question, right? It's always partial. It's like, how can you get better at aiming at Christ? Well, if you surround yourself with people who are also doing their best to aim at Christ, and you listen to people who've been trying to do that for the last 2,000 years, and have a lot of respect for the way they figured out how to do that the best, then you're probably going to get better at doing it.
And that's where the institutions coming, and it's something I think a lot about, which is the collapse of the institutions, which I think is also sort of influencing a lot of people towards what we're talking about. And that collapse, and based on what you just said there, it's like, well, we have the institutions. It's just like, as the living tradition, it's been cut off and I think a lot about this because in California and San Francisco, there was a new religion that took over, and it was called secularism, closely related to scientism. Very, very challenging to work with because it's essentially like total moral relativism, like the end state, like you can do whatever you want. And then with COVID, it's sort of that religion got a little bit too fundamentalist for me, and so I had to like wrestle with like, well, what is that? And then what's the opposite of that? And what is available to me outside of that? Because I love science. We were just talking about Michael Levin. Michael Levin's a real scientist who does all like and is really making these crazy changes. And what I loved about the interview with them and him and Vervaeke was that it felt like they were all of these scientists were confronted with the fact that none of their models that scientism had given them were appropriate for what they were seeing.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so where how did I get? So the collapse of institutions, and we're headed into strange territory. Not only with the collapse of our institutions, but the rapid transformational technology. One of which is the biological stuff, which is so complete. Like I respect Michael Levin's work, but I'm also deeply worried about some of the things they were sort of like kind of like just like putting off to the side about the nature of playing with life,
yeah,
which I think are going to be really important. But we're already there with AI. Like AI is already doing that in the same way that started with Martin Luther, which is this information processing. Like
yeah,
there's a lot of information available to everybody. What's
yeah.
your thoughts on all that stuff?
Um, well, oh gosh, so there's a bunch of different things that come up. Let me see. Um, so I'll start with just to point out that I think science is fantastic as long as it doesn't as long as it doesn't become
Ooh.
idolatry.
Yeah, interesting.
Um, and I think a lot of the secularism and scientism is not like it's actually I think just late stage Protestantism
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
of the ilk of sort of like a John Calvin.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. I just found out about him. That's
oh yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a wild character. um, but okay, well, so let's talk a little bit more about the information thing, right? Because
Yeah.
like you have these information shifts, and like when you develop writing, there's I picked this up from Mary Harrington. I don't know if you've heard of
No,
her.
I've never heard of her.
She's got some good stuff. This is from a conversation she had with Jonathan Pageau, which also have you seen the Pageau Vervaeke Levin conversation?
Yes, yeah, that's the one I got
Okay,
that
okay,
Aaron
great.
sent me. Yep, yep.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So she was really interested she's sort of a feminist scholar,
Mm.
like interested in understanding the feminist movement, and
Mm.
she's written a couple books about that. It's fascinating. But she talks one of the things she talks about in that conversation is the idea of identity, right? And that we don't
Mm.
actually have the notion of identity as the central concept emerging really until like the 60s.
Mm.
And then before that, we had this idea of the self, right? And the
Mm.
self really doesn't emerge until I think she said that starts coming around around the time of the printing press,
Mm.
right? And what was the self before? Well, the self was referred to more as the soul, and you get the idea of the soul with writing, right? Once you
Mm.
get writing, you get the idea of sort of
Yeah, interesting.
the deepest place of what it means to be us or me or a person as the soul, and then that becomes the self once you have like a closer relationship with information dissemination, which then becomes identity as you get a closer interface with the internet,
Mm.
and
Oh,
then
interesting.
so there's this way in which like okay, so what does it mean to be a person? In some sense, one of the things it means is that I'm entirely alone.
Yeah.
There's an interiority to my experience of being a person that cannot be shared with anyone ever fully,
Yeah.
right? In one way because like I don't have the capacity to share it, and in another way because it would completely tyrannize another person because they wouldn't get to experience any of their own life, right?
Wait,
So
say that again?
like if I shared all of my experience with you, you wouldn't get to have your own life
Yeah,
because you'd just
interesting.
be experiencing mine.
Yep.
So there's a way in which I'm completely alone, and at one and the same time I'm also completely with others, right? I
Mm.
don't know myself except in community with others.
Hmm.
I have no sense of what it would like.
Yep.
You can't you can try to play games and imagine yourself as a single individual, but it's all like it's always based on a castle in the sky that doesn't work. So you're necessarily with other people, and you're necessarily alone. And that's one of the central paradoxes of being a person, I think. And you I think that as one of the things I've noticed about the internet is that we tend to share things that are very, very close in. Like the internet gets really close in on you. You know, like when you read things online, like another person isn't speaking to you, and there's not, there's not sound waves coming in your ear holes, right? You're just reading something, but someone's present. A lot of people, it seems, will write things or share things that are really deeply intimate to them,
Mm.
right? And so there's this closeness of I don't
How did
know of the interior experience that is mediated by the internet.
how did the internet do that? Like, how did it lead up to that? Because particularly in the United States, where privacy was such a strong fundamental, and particularly for a lot of the people who built the internet, well, it was this
Well, I think
train. Yeah, go for it.
Well, just a quick note on the idea of privacy.
Yeah,
I think that I think that privacy has been understood as sort of like the power to choose things that you want to share or not.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Yeah,
And I think therefore it's become disconnected from any sort of realness, right? Because there's no particular aspect of life that is inherently private. It's just your choice of whether you
yeah,
want things
yeah,
to be
yeah, yeah,
private or
yeah,
not,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
like if I want to, do one of the most intimate things, such as have sex with someone and take a video and post it online, like that's no problem for privacy as long as everyone's consenting.
Yeah, interesting.
So there's nothing inherent about your reality that is private or not private. It's actually just your consent. So so I think privacy in that sense is just an illusion of basically just saying, you have the power of consent um
Yeah,
over what you want
interesting.
to share or not.
So this leads us into a totally orthogonal direction, which is the New Age, because the New Age is like has something to say on what you just said, which is the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records, I believe, is the first one, and I believe that came from Madame Blavatsky in the 1800s, but has since been developed or evolved. And one of my favorite philosophers, his name's David Hawkins. I don't think he makes fun of a lot of the New Age stuff, rightfully so, because I would say like 99% of it's totally bonkers, but so is everything. Like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And he came up with a consciousness calibration scheme, which is you can calibrate anything in the universe, and everything in the universe is open to this calibration scheme. So
Mm,
and it was one of the things that I most resistant to when I first got into his work, but then I saw his epistemological sharpness on basically a lot of things,
mm.
um, uh, and has made me question whether it's real or not. And now I do think there is something to be said that what you just said, which is that there is nothing that is secret. There are no secrets. There is privacy, but that's an institutional thing that the governments can help. And now we've got some new technology, which I'm really excited about. But it's basically all out there, and with a level of truth seeking that somebody can have based on their level of consciousness, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I feel like, in relation to particularly the concept of privacy, like
Mm,
many concepts, I think that it needs to be grounded in sort of real life, in the sense of saying, like, there are things that should actually be private, not because it's your choice or not, but it's just there's something inherent about them. Um, like having sex, for example.
yeah.
I don't know that you can have sex and share it with people that you don't know. I think I think you can have sex and share it with
Yeah.
people. I don't think you can make love and
Oh, interesting. Wow.
and disseminate it, right? Because
Yeah, interesting.
inherent in making love is that it's not for another purpose,
Wait, what do you mean?
right? Like if I'm having sex with someone, it can be sort of for a purpose. It can be
For
a means to
pleasure,
an end,
or
right?
okay, yeah.
Right. But if you're making love with someone,
Oh, interesting.
it is the end, right? It is like you're doing it for its own sake. Um, and that's just an example because I think it that is something that is properly something intimate. Um, and therefore should be like sort of properly private, but it has nothing to do with sort of the power of the individual, whether they want to share it or not. It's more like, no, there is something that is actually, if you are going to make love, which is how to access maximal
Ooh,
goodness in the space of
ooh,
physical
interesting.
pleasure, then you have to understand it as being inherently private, and that's not a matter of your agency. That's just actually like it's just built in, it's baked into the nature of reality itself.
Mm.
I think that's something different than what you were talking about with
Yeah,
with
no,
all of
no,
that.
no.
That's a whole different thing.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Uh, uh, that has more to what you just said. I have to sit with that for a while because I haven't thought about that before. The difference between having sex and making love being the end and the means,
Mhm.
and this sort of sharing, like union both at the animal level and the angelic level,
Mhm.
um, and kind of breaking that bridge of which we were talking about earlier, the barrier between being a complete individual, totally blocked off, and being
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah,
part of the entire universe and part of everything.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, but that is different than what I was saying, which was about the privacy and the secrecy thing.
Right, right, right.
Because the privacy and the secrecy thing is it's it was really strange getting into that first book with David Hawkins and being introduced into this world, and it was like right before I ended up getting way more introduced into this world of the what people call the Rainbow Bridge, and I will explain the
Okay,
Rainbow Bridge, which is there's this what is it called? There's a Rainbow Bridge. Rainbow Bridge is basically the hippies who have it started in Hawaii and then is San
okay,
Francisco and Bali and Sedona and some other places where it's basically they just hop around, and then there's an event that my friend would always go to where you go straight into the jungle and it's totally anarchic and there's no rules and everybody lives in communes and stuff like that, and they only happen every once in Rainbow Party, Rainbow Festival. I think that's one. So right before, like, so
interesting. Sure. Yeah.
I started working with a counselor who introduced me to the work of David Hawkins. David
Okay.
Hawkins had this calibration scheme. I was very much in the scientism world, although I was leaving it. And then 2020 happened, and all of a sudden I had to make a really quick exit from San Francisco, like literally from San Francisco. I bought a van, moved into the van, and drove into the forest into what I found out was later was one of the spots on the Rainbow Bridge.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And all the only other people hanging out in California and still hanging out and in person were people on the Rainbow Bridge, and so I got
Okay. Okay.
introduced into this whole world of the New Age
Uh-huh.
that had been evolving, and so since then I've started to be confronted with ways of belief that are very different from my own. This is not
Mm.
new. I had done this by going to other countries for a long time. For example, I'd lived in Thailand when I was 19 or 20, and I related with people who had Buddhist practices, and not only Buddhist practices, but like pagan pagan gods. They would make shrines to pagan gods. They would believe in
Yep.
all sorts of things. But it was always under this context of like, oh, it's a different country, so it's a different culture. And then I got
Sure.
introduced to the New Age stuff, which is so interesting because it wraps up with a lot with Christianity. There's
Right.
the 1960s was, a lot of people don't know this, but the Eastern stuff was only a small percentage of the sort of cults and the communes and everything like that. A huge percentage of it was actual Christian communities going off and sort of doing decentralized, almost like Gnostic Christian stuff, like a lot of the stuff that happened in the first couple hundred years of Christianity.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So all of that was a kind of like a long explanation for that. There's this thing that I still struggle with, which is, so the calibration thing is basically like you can take your hand. David Hawkins would do it with two people, and he said that you have to do two people, and so you can basically take anybody and say a statement like China Beijing is in China, and if it's true, you hold the hand, and if it's false, it goes like this.
Oh yes, okay, I know this.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. And then you also didn't do it with the
exactly. Yeah,
like the
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yep.
that's the calibration scheme, and
Okay.
basically, the theory is that that can show the truth or falseness of any phenomena in the world.
Okay.
But the person doing it has to be above a certain level of integrity, so they have to they have to be, and so yeah, it's just like
You have to
a
be not manipulating the response.
yes, and they yes, exactly, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, fascinating. So I'm curious. If as you went through that journey through the Rainbow Bridge,
Yeah.
and I don't know how involved necessarily you got, but it sounds like you had a reasonable amount of involvement. Like, did you find? Well, okay, so I'm curious a little bit about what that was like, and then how you've now become a lot more interested in Christianity, to where you're reading about the Reformation and these figures and trying to understand the church and all these things.
Yes, great question. So, well, and so the work of David Hawkins led me back into Christianity.
Mm.
So I grew up. I grew up as a going to church a lot.
Mm.
My mom was a minister.
Oh,
Yeah, all the. But in
in what
uh,
denomination?
Methodist.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, Methodist. But that's the thing with the Protestant stuff is it's all unclear and jumbled. Like my grandfather, he was I can't tell. I've tried to figure it out. I've gone back and read their biographies, and I can't tell whether they're Episcopalian or Puritan. They said both things. Like and so and this goes back to the history.
Oh,
But
that's an interesting
but
crossover.
I'll answer the question, which is so grew up with a Christian background, and then probably my sister was also a communist, so she handed me the Communist Manifesto when I was 13, and like I had to figure out how to pronounce proletariat and bourgeoisie, which I could not do for like 10 years, and so she handed me that, and so she was very much anti Christianity, which was an
Yeah.
interesting thing in general. And just it never hit after about probably 12 or 13. I never there is no answers to how I sort of like left it. I
There was
never
nothing compelling about it, though.
There is nothing compelling about I think that I've always felt a relationship with spiritual truth and Christianity and Christ, the figure of Christ, but it didn't, and I have the stories really deep inside of me when I like related to them when I was really young, but there's also the oh, maybe it's a little too intimate, but I had medicine, so I was on antidepressants, and I think those probably do some crazy stuff that probably felt so. But like secular,
Yeah.
it was also the secularism. It was also just like the in San Francisco Bay Area, you could be Eastern religion, you could be an Eastern religion, but it was not the Eastern religion, which I later found out. It was the puritanical version, which you described, which is
Mm.
the end stage Calvinist puritanical approach to secularism. So you could do the Buddhism thing. You just had to do it as an atheist.
Right,
And
right, right, right.
that was the only appropriate Buddhism was an atheist Buddhism that was pretended as the real thing, but
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Uh, and then the work of David Hawkins brought me back into it, and so now I'm at the stage where it's like like because of that sort of push towards the east from San Francisco and going and spending a lot of time in the monasteries, there is something beautiful there about enlightenment. And I would actually love to talk about this because it doesn't feel like the Christian doctrine or dogma has a space for enlightenment. They have the mystics, and the mystics, I think, reached those states, but they oftentimes were like killed. What do you think about this in terms of everything we've been discussing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man. Okay. So actually, so we could make
Yeah.
this a point of distinction between a great deal of Protestantism
Mm.
and traditional, and let's do Orthodox for
Mm.
this.
Yeah.
So because it's clearest there. So
Yeah.
in the Protestant world, the basic problem is that you have a, a legal issue
Mm.
where like you're in violation of legal code and you need help because you can't get yourself out of it, and so Jesus gets you into proper legal standing. This is a basic way of saying, substitutionary atonement theory. And so Jesus, if as long as you surrender your life to Jesus, whatever that means, it's a sinner's prayer, it's baptism, it's going to church, basically, then you're good to go. And you're, you're if you're serious about it, you should go on a journey of sanctification and things so that you can save more, so that you can save other people. But really, like once you're saved, right, like you're going to get into heaven when you die, and that's sort of the point. And that's sort of the idea of salvation. Salvation is sort of a transactional reality between you as an individual and God as this sort of judicial figure. And again, a thing to notice here is that God is primarily the hyper powerful agent, right? So God is defined by his power.
Yeah.
That's sort of the fundamental characteristic of God, and that's a very, very important problem. And salvation is all about you coming into right relationship, from a power perspective, or from a legal perspective with the hyper powerful agent. That's simplistic, but I think it's broadly correct. And then, whereas from the Orthodox point of view, salvation is about healing. It's about healing and restoration. So there is no sort of just like single point of salvation. Now there's a metanoia, which may be a single point where you go from just sort of like serving your own goals to trying to come into right relationship with God. But salvation is sort of this process of becoming more and more a whole person, and that there is actually a point at which one may get to, which is called theosis, which is where God and the individual become like sort of merged, basically. Like, so Maximus the Confessor, Saint Maximus the Confessor, is probably the at least for me. I mean, I would call myself a mystical Christian. I think that's right. So major influences on me are like Meister Eckhart, Nicholas of Cusa, Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, Saint Maximus the Confessor, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, these sorts of people, Saint John of Damascus. Anyway, but Saint Maximus has this very clear articulation of theosis, and this idea that really a person is most fully themselves when there's almost this paradoxical reality where God becomes like one becomes the icon of God, is the right way to say it, right? That the particular individual becomes the icon of God, and that's what a saint is. And I think it's the same thing as enlightenment, actually, because the idea that enlightenment is sort of this like you could almost say like completely proper justice across all everything in its right place in relation to everything else across all domains of life. I mean, it's basically the same thing. It's just that there's I think with Christianity, there's this idea of like particular and specific revelation that like you have a peek behind the curtain into the like, and a connection with I mean, Jesus is really the way to think about it, because Jesus is God as a particular.
Yeah, interesting.
You think about God the Father, and it's God is beyond being. He both is and is not.
Yeah.
Because to say that he is to set him off against other things that are, and you can't have that. Like God cannot be on the same order of things that he creates. So, but Jesus is God as a particular. So I think that has to be your path in.
Let's talk about personality, or sorry, the personal Jesus, because this is because with Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, I've ended up in a lot of non-personal, like truth is non-personal, the ego is not real, it's an illusion, and I think there's a lot of value there. And then I go and try to understand what the Christian perspective is, and it talks about a personal God, like that there is person, and it's sort of like. What does he call it? Heresy to say that there is no person. What's your take there?
Yeah, I mean, I think okay. So I love this stuff. This is, yeah. And like you, I mean, I have a deep respect for Buddhism and Vedanta. I mean,
Yeah.
Ram Dass was a massive impact on me, and helped me a lot get out of a lot of personal things.
Mm.
And then, I mean, I still do Vipassana meditation every morning, right after I do my prayers. So,
Mm.
so that's and I don't feel any
There's no
I don't
like
I don't
conflict
feel
between
there's
them. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's conflict between those.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a thing in itself. But the idea of, so I think part of it is the question of like, what is a person, right? Like that'll sort of that's sort of like a paradoxical meditation that sort of never ends.
Yeah.
Um, and which is, I think, part of the value, right? Like if everything is just negation, um, and this is sort of where I ended up with Buddhism a little bit, is like if everything is negation, um,
Yeah.
then like you know, you can end up erasing everything, and you can do that, but then it just sort of leaves you just sort of there.
Yeah.
And that's fine, except like the flip side is also true. Like there are actually like particular things happening, and there are particular people doing things, and if you just sort of deny all of that, and this is overly simplistic because there's like, this is not, you know, Zen Buddhism is my preferred flavor, and of course, you know, the Zen masters are great. They would have a koan for me right there,
Yeah.
like, you know,
And
so,
then slap you with a stick.
yeah, exactly. So, um, but I think the thing with Jesus, I'm actually going to stop there and let you say something.
Yeah. So, yeah.
The question around the personal God thing is,
Yeah, and I get to the same place. I don't know. It's like I've it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with there's the feeling what you said about where there's when you are with all your eccentricities, that's when you're most yourself, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
when
yeah,
the person is fully out
fully given to God.
yes, and this gets into crazy wisdom, and we can now we can go into why this show is named Crazy Wisdom, because that is feels like in Dr. Hawkins' calibration scheme, you have 0 to 1,000. So everything's on a number from 0 to 1,000, and there's various levels above 200 and below 200. Those are the most important parts. And his theory on Christ is that Christ basically came to save the world and get everybody above 200 and then above the level of 500. So 400 to 500 is the level of rationality, intellectual inquiry, theology, all the things we've been discussing. I probably would imagine starkly in the 400s. But then above the level of 500 is the level of love, and then above the level of 600 is the level of enlightenment. And so crazy wisdom feels like an inquiry into what it is above 500. And above 500 and above 600, that's the place where like the ego can't really go. It's just like
Mhm.
it can't bridge that gap because it's this sort of paradox of like separation, like how like we've been talking about with the individual versus the whole. It's like I can't tell where the separation between me and the universe is. It doesn't exist,
Yeah,
but at the same
yeah,
time, like it's very real to me. Like it's like
yeah,
if I got
yeah,
stabbed in the foot, it would be very, very real. Like something
yeah,
crossed the barrier and hurt me, and I have to go deal with that. Maybe that we could have a conversation of what it's like above the level of enlightenment with people like Ramana Maharshi, who I believe
yep,
is above that level, or Nisargadatta Maharaj, or Jesus, who like those people
yep,
might have handled it differently,
yep,
but like for me it's like that, and so that level above 500 feels like it just all the conversation, the words, it all starts to break down, and we're just kind of left with like love, which
yep,
goes back to
yep,
the whole making love thing, which is just like, and it's such a
yeah,
paradox. It's like the realm of paradox. It's like you can't go there and have conversations. Like you
yeah,
can still talk and everything, but yeah. What
yeah.
do you?
Well, I think the thing about so that one of the differences between the path to enlightenment and sort of that ascension towards
Mm.
a love that has a lower emphasis. Like it feels like there's this difference of emphasis in terms of like what suffering means. You know, suffering as like the Buddhist thing is super helpful to understand that most of suffering is your own fault and you're participating in it, you're actually making it happen. And so if you and if you really understand that and you learn the ways to like let go of the things, basically let go, so you don't cause yourself to suffer as much, it's great because then you can just feel pain and not necessarily suffer.
Yeah.
If you can stop clinging, which is also like absolutely part of the Christian thing, right? Like, but there's a Christianity places this value on pain and suffering that's different.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
like there's this thing where, and oh man, I don't love the comparative frame.
Yeah.
I don't love the comparative frame because I think it feeds back into the conflict idea. I think basically
Yeah. Interesting.
I think that Buddhism basically is a ton of practices to get you towards theosis for people who like don't have the capacity to like or have never heard about Jesus. And I think that they like
Interesting.
I think there's a tremendous amount of good to come from looking through,
Yeah.
like if you have a pair of glasses and you look through both eyes at once and you look through Christianity and you look through Buddhism, like that's pretty much what I try to do a lot of the time, and it helps a lot.
I really like what you
Uh,
just said about the theodosis and that it's a set of practices for doing theodosis. And I definitely agree. I wonder how much of the emptiness that is either placed on Buddhism or is actually part of the tradition, because they do talk about emptiness a lot,
yeah,
they talk about the void. And
yeah.
I don't think the void is something that I've heard in Christianity before. Maybe like some of the people you mentioned.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's there in the mystics, but I think one of the things that I understand Buddhism is really trying to get towards is to get you in the mode of seeing things as being relational fundamentally and not substances, right? So this is this is something that I think is going to really just once it catches on,
Mm,
revitalize Christianity, because it is fundamental to Christianity because it's the idea of the Trinity, right? That
mm,
relation, like the ground of relation, is I would say things being in relation to each other and the reality that there is relationality
mm.
are completely real together. Those are the basic realities, right? And this gets to the notion of God as a person too, right? Is that like for a thing to be a thing, it must be marked off against other things, right? There has to be a boundary to say this is a thing and this is a thing. If there's no distinction, you don't have a thing, right?
Yeah.
But the 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 field
Yeah.
upon which things can be related to each other
Interesting.
is, depending on your angle, you could say more real than the things that are
Yeah.
related to each other.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
this is, I think, the idea of emptiness and shunyata that
Yeah.
you're trying to move towards in Buddhism. Because what are you trying to do? You're trying to recognize that the thing you're seeing is not a thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That like there is no cup, right? There is no
Yeah.
spoon,
Yeah.
sort of famously, right? Because it's like it's the field that allows a thing to be a thing is more real than the things that are in the field. And that's a very Christian idea.
Wait, how so?
Not recently. Not
How so?
recently. Well, because that's what God is. God's the precondition, the the
Yeah, the substrate.
the pre
Interesting.
the precondition for thingness.
Yeah.
And it's and this is sort of what the Trinity is, right? You have three particulars that are
Uh,
also one.
yeah, interesting. Um, so, and I know we got to wrap up soon, I think. If you have to go, let me know. We could probably take
I
another
can do
10.
an extra half hour since we were able to go a little earlier.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Um, So not to strongly divert it, but I think it'd be fun to talk about because
Yeah.
we were talking about Michael Levin, and I would love to talk about technology and how, because
Oh
I
yeah.
think you have a background there as well. So,
Yeah.
and like just either it's like utopia, dystopia, like it's just like, and this just goes back to all the, because I've been doing a lot of research into the Renaissance and the Thomas More. Thomas More came
Oh
up
yeah.
with utopia. He came up with this idea of utopia, and all the other guys too, because you had the Protestants, you had the Catholics, and they were both at each other's throat, and they were killing each other. And then you had these weird, divergent, people who didn't want to do either one, and so they created a bunch of secret societies, which then also the Catholics went after that, and then the Protestants also went after that, called it sorcery, and they created these utopias, and they created all these like crazy. It's that same thing that I was talking about with the Rainbow Bridge. It's like the earliest version of the Rainbow Bridge, I would say, but so, and we're there now. We're like all those crazy people who are doing those divergent things ended up coming up with science, and science is now doing allowing us to all become gods. Like, and
Yeah.
that's really interesting and really cool and really awesome. But then also like, whoa, guys, let's calm down. And particularly where I'm coming from, they are not going at it from a way that is humble or like, yeah, what do you think? Where are we headed? How can we, is that like we're talking about the future, so it's really difficult to know about the future, but what do you think is going on like with technology and the secularism and the scientism?
Yeah, man. Oh. One of the things I notice is that, like I do medicine, right? So I do
Yeah.
cardiology.
Ah,
So I see patients every
well,
day who have heart problems.
yeah.
And I see a lot of people who seem to treat their experience in their physical body
Yeah.
as a nuisance,
Yeah.
as a sort of necessary evil that they have to get through in order to get back into their phones. And they are quite frustrated with the ways that their bodies malfunction,
Yeah.
and they have a really difficult time actually doing anything in and through their body to make their
Well,
experience in their body better. That's a hallmark of I think the modern world, right? People really don't want to actually make choices such that their bodies work better. They really want technology to make their bodies work better. Um, and so, I find I find a thought that recurs to me often is that it, and it's almost more of like on the order of like a premonition of like a feeling that there's going to be at some point um a company, right? Because it'll be like a corporation to make money that the offer is, you come live in, whatever space they decide works the best, and you basically give us your body, we'll take care of your body, and we'll sort of optimize it, and you can spend all of your time in a digitally mediated, or who knows, as
yep.
Neuralink gets better, maybe it's whatever sort of mediation you want to consider that being, where your consciousness is completely without constraint. So this is sort of
Hmm.
like Alan Watts, I wonder what you would do if you could dream any dream you wanted to,
Hmm.
right? But like that's your waking reality too. Like that's all you do. But and your body becomes no longer a nuisance because that's taken care of by the corporation. And of course the corporation is benefiting somehow monetarily from this. And I think if that was on offer right now, I think a great many people would there'd be a line around the block. Um, and it's a little bit like the Matrix in a way, except it's the, and I've actually had people say this to me when I've been having sort of introductory philosophical conversations with them, where they say, I'm the guy. I had this just a couple weeks ago. A guy said to me, he said, I'm the guy who in the Matrix put me back in the Matrix
Yeah.
and give me the good steak. Don't
Yeah.
tell me what's real. Don't tell me what's going on. Just let me just sort of exist in my happy little place. And I think
Mhm.
that's what a lot of people want. They don't want what's real. They want um,
Or
sort of just
simulation, like a total simulation,
yep,
and it makes sense because that's what the internet already gives us, is a simulation. And I mean, we could go back to the sex conversation. That's what porn is. Porn is a
yep.
simulation of sex, and it's one that a lot of people found attractive, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there is it's not the real thing. It's not making love, and so the simulations are getting really good. This is the craziest thing about the everything, is that the way the computers worked is that we had CPUs, and then in order to make graphics on our computers, they invented GPUs so that people could play video games. And GPUs then are now being used for AI models, and the AI models are now being used to make really good simulations. And those not for humans to simulate, although those are coming too as well, but for robots to simulate physical environments. And so that's going to come back and then make VR really good. And all these things are in the pipeline. They've been talked about for 10 to 20 years. There's a lot of people who have zero questions about whether this is a good thing. Definitely a good thing. It's gonna, and I'm not one of those people. I have huge reservations. I think I have no problem playing in those simulations. But I think at the end, I think most humans, maybe over a very long period of time, will come to the recognition that it is just a simulation. But also the Gnostic thing, which
Yeah.
is
Yep.
is like
Very nice.
this
Yeah.
this is also a simulation. Like,
Yep.
my senses are simulating this environment,
Yep.
and give me some iboga, give me some ketamine, give me some MDMA, and all of a sudden it becomes really clear that this experience that I have in my waking life is also a bit of a simulation in general. But there's God in that simulation. But I guess, there's also God in the other simulation, right? Or yeah.
Well, I think it has to do with two things. First of all, I think all technology is basically just an increase of power
Hmm.
towards whatever goal you want,
Interesting
right?
leverage. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so again, what matters, if we go back to the spirit conversation, what matters is the spirit, right? What's your goal? If your goal,
Interesting.
what telos is it oriented towards? If your goal is subjective well-being
Yeah,
or
interesting.
happiness, right? Whatever
Yeah,
you
interesting.
want, which is, I think, broadly everyone's goal.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's actually just a deception. I think that's just a basic deception. What you don't want is subjective well-being. That's not what you want. Uh, what it's a very, very seductive deception.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not what you want. What you want is reality.
Yeah, interesting.
What you want is meaning, and meaning only happens when you're in touch with what's really real. And it's true that I think it's true in a way to say, I think, that our senses simulate the reality, but I think it's true in the way of compression, right? I think they
Mm,
compress reality
interesting.
because they interact with what's real, and they compress it and present it to our consciousness in a compressed form. And I think you're also right that when you take medicines, you see broader swaths or different angles
Yeah.
on a reality that's always present. But I would say from my own experience that you can practice paying attention and perceiving in such a way that levels of reality that
Yeah.
aren't available to you usually become available to you. But I think that has to do also, again, just come back to Jesus here, like that
Mm,
has to do also with being oriented towards a spirit that's high enough that you don't get
mm.
lost, right? The thing about Jesus
Yeah,
and the
interesting.
spirit of Christ is that the more you become, um the more Christ lives in you, the more you can see and not be deceived. Because if you
Yeah.
can just see a lot and you think you're orienting your own desires, they're actually orienting you, I think.
Ooh. Say that again. So,
I think the more
yeah.
you can see without having a clear heading beyond all things that you could possibly see, the more you are going to be sort of deceived into just following your own desires with ever increasing complexity.
Yeah. Yeah. And now the means too, because it's like 500 years ago, nobody had the means except for a
Yeah.
king, and now we're far, I now live a life that is far surpassing of a king. So it's
I knew
yeah.
there's that line that I knew that the future would bring wonders. I just didn't know it would make them ordinary.
Oh, interesting. Uh, okay, so we're headed rapidly into this future where all of our desires are now able to be manifested, but they're sort of like they're simulated desires, and everybody has them too, so it makes them less meaningful. Like when a king was having them, then yeah, like you just
Right,
said,
right, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So, but then you said something really interesting, which is that depends on the level of the spirit that your goal is associated with.
yeah,
So as long as you can order that in a sort of vertical way, then you're all good. You got the discernment. But the issue at hand is that secularism, since 1945, is now dominant, or was
yeah.
dominant, in up until about 2020, and
And
now
now
it's
it's just
like,
chaos.
yeah, now it's just chaos. Now there's
Well, it's
just
more like neo-paganism, actually. I think
neo-paganism.
there's a
Go into
lot of
that. Yeah,
neo-paganism happening.
yeah, there is. Yeah,
Yeah.
what's the deal there? What's your thought on neo-paganism?
Well, I think it's just that people are starting. A lot of people are beginning to recognize that spirits are real. But a lot of people are getting really invested in lower order spirits, which is what paganism is, right? Like it's not like any of the gods of paganism aren't real. Like they're very real. It's just like, if the highest spirit you worship is Athena, then like you have to go live in Athens.
So this gets into the India thing, because this, like, the paradox of India for me has been a really hard one to understand, and in some ways Thailand, because like the Thailand has Buddhism, and Buddhism is supposed to be an atheistic thing, but it's not. It's like if you go to Thailand, they're praying to Indian gods because the Indian gods are really powerful, so they whatever. And but somehow India also created the ability to have a sense of almost like a monotheistic sense, but with these lower gods.
Yeah.
Like, have you
The
looked into
Hindu.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because how can I equate the fact that I grew up with this idea that paganism is a really destructive idea, or destructive reality, with the fact that in this country there's just, or not even a country, it's like a culture over thousands of years developed one of the most powerful maps to enlightenment,
Yeah.
and is pagan, and is also not pagan, and is a whole bunch of other things. Like it's really hard for me to.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think what they were able to break through is that like I think you're sort of like run of the mill basic paganism, sort of like, let's say, Europe around,
Yeah.
or let's just take
Yeah.
the ancient world, where the
Yeah.
ancient Greeks, for example, like
Yeah.
just to make it easy. Like what you have there is they understand that there's a pantheon of gods. So they understand that there's different ones,
Yeah. And
right?
there's different levels.
So that's good, right? And that but they sort of like fixate, each person for whatever reason, or polity or state or whatever, has their particular one, which is, I think,
Yeah. Interesting.
again, I'm basically a Christian, right? So I think a principality is a real thing.
Yeah.
That like, like I think there is a spirit of America. So I mean,
Interesting.
we'll just throw this as a brief thing. Like I think, Donald Trump is a wizard of the spirit of America in a particular way,
Whoa.
right?
Yes.
But
Interesting.
but sorry, that's just a
Yes.
a little bomb to throw on the side.
Yeah.
But I think what Vedanta was able to do was to notice that there's this pantheon, but get beyond particular, right? They noticed that you sort of have this hierarchy that goes all the way up, and then at the border of like the top, it sort of flips into non-being. There's a beyondness to it, right? So like the problem with paganism is that you stop somewhere.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right? I think the problem for Hinduism is that, frankly, God actually has to become real at some point. God has God has to actually step into creation at some point.
As a personal God.
Like he has to become a real person. Like he has to become an actual human being.
Yeah, interesting. And that's what Jesus did.
And that's they have, they talk about Ram and these other things where you sort of have, you have this sort of these stories of that sort of thing, but it's nothing like Jesus, right? Because Jesus is about as like Jesus is as historically solid of an ancient figure as you can get. And so it's like, well, it's a wild thing. It's like, well, there's all the across every, this is a C.S. Lewis argument basically. It's like, across you have across traditions, you have all these stories of gods becoming men. But the wild thing is, like, in Christianity, like, you really do get the sense that it actually happened once.
Yeah, interesting.
Because I think the historical argument, contrary to what a lot of people seem to think, is like maybe the strongest argument for Christianity there is, because it's like, well, you do have to actually contend with the fact that the entire world shifted on its axis, not just because it like the religion sprang up and took over the world from this one guy, but also like it restructured the value hierarchy of how we perceive morality. And that's a pretty profound thing, I think.
But it feels like Buddha did that as well. Like, it feels that like, and I got into such an interesting thread with asking the LLM about histories of religions, and I can't remember what sparked it. It was about it was back on that conversation about enlightenment, and how the idea of enlightenment, that it doesn't feel like there's a space within Christianity to make way for enlightenment, at least within Protestantism and I think Catholicism. I think what you said about Orthodox is true, and I'm definitely going to go think about that a lot more. But like the making space for enlightenment and making it acceptable as a goal, that's what it feels like Buddha really did. And so I was wondering whether that institutionalization of Buddhism actually threatened, because there was a king in India called Gupta, and Gupta went and converted India to Buddhism, and made it a state religion, but it actually like disappeared from India, which is a whole other crazy story. But it ended up in China, and the Confucianists hated it. The Confucians hated enlightenment because the idea that people could go meditate in a monastery for 10 years is like they're abandoning their family. Like the family was all this stuff, and totally forgot how we got here, but like,
well, to think about the idea of like because Jesus and Buddha, like if we look at them side by side, like I don't get the sense, at least from the things that are closest to Buddha, right? Like the closest thing to the Gospels, because Buddha does seem to be a very real historical character as well. I don't get the sense that Buddha made the claim that he was God.
No, he never. No.
Right, and I do think that I think the path to theosis or enlightenment, which I think are basically the same things. I mean, if in the sense of their essence, like what they actually are, the state of being that is full and total communion with all of reality. I think those are basically the same things. I think that has always been available for everyone. And I think that some people actually have punched through that hole. And I think that Buddha,
without dogma, without institutions, without everything.
Yeah, like it's just a real thing. It's there. And so I think Buddha did that. And the sort of the discharge of reality that came through him sort of, gave that reality.
I'm remembering a specific time when in the John Vervaeke series, which I imagine that you listened to, the Meaning Crisis, where he's telling the story of Buddha after Buddha getting reaching enlightenment, goes and talks, and he's got this just crazy aura, and then he goes to talk to somebody, and they're like, "What? Are you a god?" And then he's like, "No, I'm not a god." He's like, "Are you a man?" It's like, "No, I'm not a man." Just like, so I think you're right, and this gets back to that emptiness, and so like this idea of Jesus as God is really interesting. Sort of and it's just so the whole world seems so unprepared and so crazy, because it's only since 1945, it's only since 1945 that the world works the way it currently works, with secularism at the top. Like, the atheists. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Well, that, I mean, I think that's a really good insight. Yeah. Because I think one of the things that you basically had happen is that instead of the world being predicated fundamentally towards the good as revealed by Jesus, the world became predicated away from the bad as revealed by Hitler.
Whoa. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
and that
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Whoa. Yeah.
you will always get yourself in a world of hurt by trying to move away from
Yeah.
evil.
Yeah.
Moving away from evil
Yeah.
is a terrible direction to take. Not that you should move towards evil,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
should move
Yeah.
towards good.
Because moving away from evil recognizes its reality, and you never want to recognize its reality. You just kind of want to not ignore it, but it's like you do.
Well, I think you can
Yeah.
recognize it. I think it's just that you make the like anything that sets the boundary of like or
Yeah.
anything that is the thing that you're uh, the thing that you perceive as the real thing, whether you're moving towards it or away from it, is actually the most important point. The most important point is what you perceive to be the real.
Yeah.
And if you perceive the
Yeah,
real
yeah.
thing to be goodness and you're moving towards goodness, you will move away from evil.
Yeah.
But the point will be the goodness. Whereas if you're moving away from evil, you might still be moving away from evil, but you may be moving into worse evil.
Yeah, interesting. And that gets into the altruism stuff about how like the goal of saving the world from evil, it's the from evil is the challenge because it just brings up a whole lot of epistemological things of like do we really know what the means are or the ends are and all this altruism and like the the communism type of thing where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna get there, we'll do it, just let me
Yeah.
take power here for 20 years and we'll get you there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And the problem
So
there is you also don't know what good is, right? Like
yeah, well, how do you know what good is for the last 5 minutes? Like,
I don't think you do. I think goodness is um you know goodness is one of the I mean you can never understand it, you can never grasp it, you can never contain
yeah,
it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
interesting.
like what does it mean for something to be good? Well, is it a good chair? Right? What's the difference between a good chair and a bad chair? Well, a good chair fulfills follows through on the promise of serving the function of chair,
Yeah,
right? And a bad chair does not follow through on the promise of what a chair means, right? A chair is like it has to be, it's associated with purpose, right? Does something fulfill its purpose, right? Well, then it's good,
yeah,
right? And so I think that goodness is a I mean, gosh, it's something that you can notice and move towards, but something that you can never sort of like point to and say, that is the good. And in terms of like the altruism thing, it's a little bit, you could say it from another angle of saying that you're too small, right? In order to know what would be good, you have to be able to see everything. Like if you want to know what's good for like even your own life, it's like, well, you have to be able to see your whole life and all the possible outcomes. Like, is it good for me to get in a car accident on the way home? Like, well, I don't think so, but like it might be.
yeah. I like that. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can our listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This was so fun. So I started a YouTube channel several years ago. It's called Climbing Mount Sophia. It's not super active now, although I occasionally will still post some podcasts on there, and I have a Twitter as well, so you can find me on there, Ken Lowry, I think. So
Nice.